What is going on, guys? Welcome to Dynasty Dumbies, your home for the latest in college football news and action. We're your hosts, Tony and Hunter, and we're just going to jump right into this weekend because there's a lot of action to cover.
Yeah, I mean, the games this week were incredible. As you can see, Saturdays we moonshine. I was at that WVU game, and that was not the only great game, but let's just jump right into this scoreboard and highlight some of the games off the top. I want to start out with NC State shuts out Wake Forest in the second half, 34-24. I don't know if you saw, but food truck fire at the start caused a little bit of a smoke screen on the field in that first half, but then NC State smoked them in the second. That was a little fun college football quirk that you love to see. While Houston handled Colorado 36-20, despite that game getting a little bit close in the first half, they really pulled away. And then Arizona edges out Kansas State 23-17. Kansas State falls again, a team that I had rated high in the beginning of the season, but
Yep.
Avery Johnson just is not getting the job done, but Arizona gets the win. That's a huge one for him.
Yeah, and speaking of teams that just can't get the job done, New Mexico State hands UCLA its second straight Mountain West Conference loss, making UCLA go to 0-3. And then the topic we'll get in later, they do end up firing their head coach. Ohio State beats Ohio despite a really slow start, 37-9, in a game that I thought Ohio State was just going to blow them out of the water, but ended up being somewhat closer, I would say. And
that
Oregon,
first half definitely was.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then Oregon gets a nice 20-point win over Northwestern, 34-14, in I would say a tough environment in Northwestern, being on the edge of the lake right there in such a small stadium. So.
Yeah, I would love for that to be the permanent stadium right on the lake edge. I think it's a really cool thing, but
yeah,
knowing they're building that state-of-the-art facility, it's not going to last. So enjoy it while you have it, Northwestern fans.
Yep.
But I want to dive into a little bit of Texas versus UTEP. Texas really struggled in this one despite winning 27-10. Was not a great showing for Arch again. That offense has yet to find its footing, while Oklahoma definitely found its footing against Temple, throttling them 42-3. And then Iowa State survived Arkansas State 24-16 in a game I think most people did not expect to be that close.
I think they were just distracted by that beautiful stadium of theirs. It's hard to go into a place like that and not just marvel at its beauty. So
yeah,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, if we get to mention that waterfall and stadium every week, that's a win for me.
Absolutely, I would love to just go be able to see it in person one day. So. And then jumping into another one with an Arkansas team is Ole Miss starts 3-0 with their win over Arkansas, which was a shootout. They won 41-35, and if I'm not mistaken, it was 28-21 at half, I believe, but an absolute barn burner there. And Alabama punishes Wisconsin in the game that we both predicted Alabama would win, 38-14. And then shout out Delaware, getting their first FBS win as an FBS program against UConn in overtime, 44-41.
Yeah, Delaware, a JMU rival from the FCS days. So, I don't know if I'm glad or mad to see them finally getting that first FBS win, but I do think it's good for the sport. JMU is going to be playing them later, not this year, but in a couple years. So hopefully they can hit the ground running at FBS and really bring that rivalry back to life. But North Texas obliterated Washington State 59-10. And I really think North Texas is a team to watch in the AAC despite all this hype around Tulane and USF. They're 3-0. They've been demolishing teams. I really think they got to keep an eye on them and have a chance to win the conference.
Yeah, I agree with you. North Texas is very much a team to watch, but I'd also like to give a shout out to Memphis. They've also started 3-0 and what is turning out to be a stacked American Conference teams.
Yeah, I'm the Sun Belt sympathizer, but I think I got to hand it to the American this year. I think they are the best Group of 5 conference as of right now. They got some really good teams. But USC handles Purdue 33-17 as well. And then shout out the Sun Belt. ODU pile drives Virginia Tech in Blacksburg 45-26. I want to give myself a pat on the back here. It's a game that I actually predicted as an upset, but took off of our outline before our preview episode for this week just because I didn't think it was interesting enough. I was wrong. think that's a little bit of payback for ODU on Tech for rescheduling their series. They had a few more games planned as a home and home in Norfolk and Blacksburg, and Tech backtracked. So ODU beats them, and Tech, as we talked earlier, we'll get more into this, but Tech does fire Brent Pry, so a new era will be starting in Blacksburg.
Yeah, you love to see the Sun Belt. And speaking of the Sun Belt, Southern Miss outclasses App State in a Sun Belt showdown 38-22, while Navy keeps the momentum going against Tulsa in an American Conference game 42-22.
Yeah, shout out the Armed Forces. Navy is looking dangerous. And then Cal beats Minnesota 27-14. The Calgorithm might be back. They're 3-0. They have a fairly lighter ACC schedule than most, so they have a good chance of running the table and being in the ACC title game conversation at the end of the year.
Absolutely.
And despite the slow start, Arizona State did beat Texas State 34-15. The game, they looked way better in the second half. They had some insane plays that we saw highlighted on social media, but they get the job done there.
Yeah, some really great slate of games so far, but we're going to dive straight into our games of the week, or what we feel are the games of the week, starting off with LSU playing Florida. LSU squeaks past Florida in a kind of, I don't want to say close, but kind of close game. They end up winning 20-10, and it just did not look good on the Florida side of the ball.
No, this really felt like a game LSU did handle, but it never really felt like Florida was in it. But LSU was just trying to give them every chance to give them that opportunity to stay into it. Lagway continued to struggle. He threw the ball 49 times, which is never great to see at the college level. 287 yards, a touchdown, and 5 interceptions.
Rough.
Looked like a game you and I play in NCAA against each other when I'm down big. I still think he's going to be the guy. I think Florida's issues are bigger than just him right now, though.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it just seems like that program as a whole is just kind of on fire, and it has not gotten going whatsoever. We thought this was the year that they could maybe take that step and cement themselves in the SEC conversation, but it seems like they've taken 10 steps backward at this time. So I think it's going to be sooner rather than later that we see Billy Napier get the boot here, and it'd almost be dumb of them not to at this point, because it clearly can tell that this team is not getting any better.
Yeah, I think we were both fairly high on Florida to start the year, and they just haven't lived up to that hype, and it's a little disappointing to see the talent they have not being able to produce on the field. And I guess we'll have to see what happens with Napier, but it's not looking great for him now. Now he falls below 500 in his career in Florida. I saw a stat he'd have to win 28 straight games to match their former coach's winning percentage, which is not Dan Mullen, his winning percentage, who was also fired. But also wanted to just touch on the LSU offense a little bit. They struggled on third down in this one, 4-14, which I think was a big reason why Florida was able to stay in the game score-wise despite the turnovers. And Nussmeier had a decent game, 220 yards, a touchdown and a pick. He does appear to have picked up a torso injury from this game. It was something that was noted going in, and it's something that we're going to continue to monitor. But definitely not the best performance from LSU in a game that they had every opportunity to run away from.
Yeah, I mean, you should be able to win a game pretty handedly when their quarterback's throwing 5 interceptions. So something looks like it needs to get clicking for that offense, or else when they get to the dog days of the SEC, it's going to turn south pretty quickly. But moving on to something that is also already pretty south is Brian Kelly continue to being Brian Kelly. In a funny sort of moment during the game, he gets absolutely leveled on the sideline, which is not the first time it's happened when he's been coaching. So it's always kind of like a lighthearted, funny thing to see when coaches, they love to be involved in the game and get as close as they can, and then they don't see that player come in and they get absolutely just flatlined. But then after the game, just absolutely snaps at a reporter, which he has since apologized as of today. But it's just something that has happened sometimes with him that just doesn't look good on him and look good on the program.
Yeah, reporters, it's their job to ask questions, even if it's not a question that the coach wants to hear. And I understand, Brian Kelly and coaches wanting to enjoy that win and to defend their players when they feel like, they're not getting the credit. But it was a fair question about the LSU offensive struggles in this game, specifically on third down as well. And I don't think it was called for the level of aggression Brian Kelly showed this reporter. I'm glad that he did apologize this morning, apologize to him privately and publicly. That is definitely the right call. And I hope this reporter continues to ask these tough questions, because I think it's too often in sports that, especially American sports, that reporters just throw lob ball questions up because they want to keep those media credentials when it's their job to keep people honest.
Yeah, it's something you always want to see is, these reporters asking the questions that people want to hear instead of just the typical, like, oh, great job, how do you feel about it sort of thing. You want to find out what went wrong, what they plan on doing to get better, and all those sort of things. So
exactly.
What's next for both of these programs is Florida will be traveling to Miami to play a newly highly ranked Miami team on our polls, which we'll get into later. And they somehow land College Game Day. Not a fan of it, but we'll possibly discuss that a little later.
Definitely on the preview episode later this week, too, and we get a preview of next week's slate of games.
Yeah, but this is something for Florida where they can get absolutely blown out of the water, or if they can go down there and get a win, they can bring themselves back into that top 25 conversation. And then LSU will be hosting FCS Southeastern Louisiana in a game that should be almost a gimme game for them, but we'll have to see if they can get their offense going and put up a lot of points.
Yeah, definitely will give them a chance to get right on offense. But speaking of not looking sharp on offense, USF did not show up in the way that either of us predicted. I know you had taken Miami and I took USF, but Miami dominated them 49-12 in a game where I called out the 17.5 point spread. It might have needed to be more. USF just could not get the offensive going. Their lowest output, 332 yards so far in the season, only 40 yards on the ground. That is just not a recipe to win against a top team like Miami.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone really saw this coming. I understand that the spread was, not favorable towards USF, but 37-point differential there is something that is just like, whoa. A USF team that has looked very good in its first two games against ranked opponents, albeit that the Florida win is starting to age like milk. But USF still a team, a strong team, I believe. And this also just goes to prove that Miami is a absolute legit team, and they are a force to be reckoned with. They had 576 total yards of offense, 205 on the ground alone. This is, possibly one of the most complete Miami teams that it looks like they've had in a while, since you could say, the good old days of Miami, albeit. They had a good team last year, but their defense was horrible, and then their offense was a little lackluster, barring some Cam Ward magic. But this year they look complete from top to bottom.
Yeah, it definitely looks like a hungrier team, I think, than last year. And you mentioned Carson Beck. I mean, he threw 2 interceptions, but outside of those 2, he looked really sharp. 23 of 28, 340 yards and 3 tutties. We've talked about it before. He definitely looks like that first-round draft pick that people were hyping up last year. I think Miami, they can go as far as Carson Beck can take them. And if he continues to play at this level, they can go a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they could, if they sustain this type of play throughout, being in a Power 4 in that ACC and a somewhat, easier schedule, like I've mentioned multiple times. They don't leave the state of Florida till November 1st. So you can win the games you're supposed to win, and then even the harder games, you win them comfortably. They're a team that could possibly be fighting for that 1 seed later on.
Yeah. And, looking ahead to next week for both these teams, USF finally gets what could be a little bit of a breather game against South Carolina State after the first tough 3 games. They'll be hosting them, a chance to correct the mistakes that we saw, get that run game going, while, like we just mentioned, Miami's going to be hosting Florida for this week's College Game Day. Definitely a topic that we're going to get into a little bit more, but no surprise, ESPN wants to travel with the SEC. They have that financial interest in it. But speaking of the SEC, in a game that we both took Georgia in, Georgia squeaks past Tennessee 44-41 in overtime, and what might be the game of the year already. It lived up to the hype, back and forth. I will admit, Tennessee, I might not have you ranked still, but you're a damn good team.
Yeah, this game was phenomenal from start to finish. I mean, Georgia is very much well known for their defense, and usually the SEC is known for its defense. But as our friend Will has been saying in these games, is they're playing like Big 12 teams in these shootouts.
Yeah, you'd think Geno Smith's back out on the field.
Yeah, it's these fun teams, great teams ending up in these fun games where it's like on the edge of your seat almost the entire game, and it was just fantastic to watch. And got to give a shout out to both quarterbacks, Tennessee Joey Aguilar and Georgia's Gunnar Stockton, both playing extremely well, with Joey Aguilar throwing for 371 yards, 4 touchdowns, threw 2 picks, but also added a rushing touchdown, while Gunnar Stockton threw for 304, 2 touchdowns, and had his rushing touchdown as well.
Yeah, I mean, both quarterbacks really played well. Aguilar started out really hot this game, and he even admitted he cooled off a little bit, which definitely hurt Tennessee. But, man, did he leave everything out there. You really can't fault him for that. Gunnar, he really played well as well as Joey, honestly. And it was just one of those games that had to be fun to be sitting and nailing live. I know that place was rocking with College Game Day there. I think ultimately, I do think Tennessee outplayed Georgia, and this is something Kirby Smart even agreed with in his post-game press conference. He thought Tennessee outplayed them for the most part. Georgia just found the way to win, and ultimately I think the penalties hurt Tennessee this game, and they just couldn't overcome some mental mistakes that really held them back.
Yeah, and speaking of that penalty, I wanted to touch on the almost, I would say, questionable decision at the end of the game there before heading into OT, where Tennessee had the ball. They were in field goal range, or trying to get into field goal range, and they were trying to get one more play off to get on the side of the field that the kicker would prefer, and ended up getting a false start, pushed them 5 yards back. But it was still 3rd down, 7 seconds left in the game, and they still had a timeout, I believe, maybe even 2. And watching the game, and they trot out the field goal team, and I'm thinking, why are we not running one more play? It's 3rd down. There's easily enough time to get one more run play off to get, even if it's a yard or 2 more, you could do something. You have a timeout to play with, and it made no sense to me why they're not even going to even consider it. And I know Tennessee coach Josh Heupel, I believe, said that they didn't want to risk losing any more yards because they were already on the fringe of, they thought what his range would be. But I just feel like you would want to try and make it easier for your kicker, who, when they were doing close-up shots of his face, looked like he had zero confidence in any kick that he was going to go out there and take. I mean, he looked like he was seeing nothing but blankness because his eyes were gone. He looked like he was so far gone, and it showed on that kick when just shanks it and ends up going into OT.
Yeah, and it's tough being a young college kid. I mean, you got 100,000 people, cheering for you. I do not envy the position he was in, but I definitely agree with you. There's an opportunity there to possibly help him out just a little bit, no matter how much. I think it would have been good to try, but ultimately I don't think that decision decided the game. You have a lot of plays throughout that did it, but definitely something that I personally would have been trying to get just those couple extra yards to help him out.
Yep. When it comes to kicking, I mean, every yard matters, especially in the college way where these kickers aren't NFL kickers yet. They're not going to be able to easily hit a 50 and whatnot. So you got to try and get every inch that you can and make sure that you have the confidence in your kicker.
Yeah, I agree. It's a big difference between college kickers and NFL pros. I mean, it is so huge, the difference. You go from around 136 starters at the FBS level to just 32. The cream of the crop really does come out on top of the NFL, and college kickers, no disrespect, they just are not at that same level as the best in the NFL. And if you can help them out, I think you should take advantage of that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. But if there's one thing that this game showed is that Tennessee does deserve the respect, that they can hang with the best teams in the SEC and the best teams in the country. And I think one thing they're really looking to earn is your respect.
Yes, I mean, they definitely earned my respect. Maybe not enough for a vote in the polls yet, but they are a team to watch. I think they're gonna string together some wins against some other SEC teams, and I think by the end of the year, if they can keep up this kind of play, you'll see them in my top 25. But I'm not going to reward them for a loss. If they had won this game, they would have made probably the top 15 easy, but going to have to keep them outside my rankings, as we'll dive into a little bit later. But next week, Tennessee is going to get a chance to get right against Alabama Birmingham when they come to Neyland. Then UGA is going to get a bye, and then the following week, they will welcome Alabama to Athens in a game that's really going to be a huge one in the SEC when it comes down to it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a good one to see here in a couple weeks here. But moving on to the next one, we're going to have Texas A&M traveling to South Bend and shocking Notre Dame 41-40.
Yeah, I mean, ESPN Instant Classic written all over it. We said, Georgia Tennessee might have been game of the year, but then there's this game, and man, was it fun to watch. I got to watch the whole second half of this one, and it was an electric game. I first want to say we're hoping for the best for A&M safety Bryce Anderson, who went down right at the end of the first half. All signs are looking positive. He gave that thumbs up. Head coach Mike Elko did said he had all movement in his extremities, so we'll monitor this one, but hoping for the best for Bryce. Hate to see an injury like that.
Yeah.
It's really scary to see. But his team pulled through for him. They said they won it for him. It's their A&M's first ranked win on the road since 2014 versus Auburn. It was a very impressive win. I will have to eat my words. I took Notre Dame by double digits in this one, and a certain someone in our friend group would not let me forget that. He will, you know what you said, you know who you are. But I got to shout out you. You did take A&M in this one. What did you see from A&M that really helped them pull away here at the end?
Yeah, they just looked like they were, out there to win that game. They showed no signs of wavering when things got tough, and they just kept going out there and competing to the best of their ability. It was fantastic from start to finish. I mean, the receivers were having a day. A&M wide receiver Mario Craver had 7 catches, 207 yards, and a touchdown. Absurd stat line for any receiver to reach that 200 mark. But Notre Dame running back Jeremiah Love finally got some love going his way, where he finally got some good yardage after a disappointing week 1. He had some 94 yards and a touchdown, which is good. But it really just looked like A&M was just pulled it together there. I don't know if it was just a well thought out game plan. I thought they honestly could have won by more if Marcel Reed was able to hit on some of these deep balls a little better. Their quarterback. Mm-hmm. It's obvious that he's still got things to work on, but he looked very solid in that game against a very, very tough opponent on the road. And if that's what they look like, just in going into week 3, if they can string it together and he can click on some of those plays, they could be a very dangerous team in the rest of the season.
Yeah, I agree with you. A&M, I talked about Tennessee not getting my votes for the rankings yet. A&M, you'll see, did finally get put into my top 25. But I think from a Notre Dame perspective, they're 0-2 now, and their playoff hopes are on life alert. That botched extra point snap is really going to end up haunting them. Their schedule is not favoring them. Even if they go 10-2, they're really going to need the teams they face to keep winning. I think for them to be considered for the playoff, they're gonna have to win out, and they're gonna have to beat USC and have USC finish in the top 15 for them to get that chance to make the playoff. I know that we say this as fans, but there's a chance that no matter what, if Notre Dame goes 10-2, they're going to put the brand in over anything. But it's a disappointing way to lose a game on a botched extra point, and then to lose on the last play of the game, with on 4th and goal. I don't think this ultimately decided the game, but I do want to say that thought the refs missed a pretty blatant hold, or I should say just straight up tackle against A&M on that final play. A&M did overcome 13 penalties, which, that's a huge thing to overcome. But this one I think was a very daunting missed call. I mean, the nose guard just straight up got tackled by the center. It allowed Marcel Reese to roll to his left, find his tight end, who had an incredible catch. Don't want to take away how hard A&M played. They deserve to win this game. But I do think that's a huge missed call. I know, they always say on any given play you could call holding. This is just one of those ones where that one's a must call, in my opinion. That's a hard one to miss.
Yeah, I didn't know what to think of it at the time. I was just almost like too excited about what was going on. But after seeing it over and over again, it was like, yeah, probably should have called that one. But needless to say, I mean, it was still a great play from the tight end to be able to make that catch. And I do think that one missed call, albeit did kind of end up, shifting the game for A&M, but overall, I think ND's Notre Dame
botch the extra point, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah, they're gonna go and look at that game overall on film and be like, that one thing is not gonna change what happened. You cannot botch it. It's one of those things that's supposed to be automatic, and it just did not look good for them there. So they'll have a major time to try and fight back here and get themselves back into that prime position. But them being 0-2 and still ranked, which we'll get into, somewhat blows my mind. But we'll have to see how this turns out for them with the schedule they have.
Yeah, I do think Notre Dame's a really great team, but you got to win. Results matter to Dynasty Dummies, and 0-2 is not showing the results. But they'll have a chance to bounce back when they host Purdue this coming week. And then A&M will get a chance to face a really tough Auburn team, so it'll be a good test for A&M to really solidify themselves as one of the top teams in the country.
Yeah, that'll be a really good game to watch here with SEC play starting to kick into effect here. So it has a chance for A&M to solidify themselves as a top team going against a tough Auburn team that is currently ranked in the AP, I believe, and then Notre Dame just, Purdue has a history of upsetting people on the road, so we'll have to see if Notre Dame can pull through there and get the win that they desperately need.
Yeah, they're gonna have to continue to win in convincing fashion. But speaking of teams proving that they belong, Vanderbilt outdueled South Carolina 31-7. This is a game that I took. I thought Vandy was going to pull it off. I know you took South Carolina. I'm glad the Commodores could pull it off. Do have to note, Lenore Seller did get knocked out early, which definitely hurt South Carolina. He's their leader. He did suffer a concussion on a targeting play, which we'll probably get into a little bit more later this episode. He might be out this coming week against Mizzou, so hoping him the best. Concussions are nothing to joke about. But Vanderbilt, despite the Sellers injury, they looked really good. They snapped a 16-game losing streak to the Gamecocks, and it's their first road win against a top 25 team since 2007, the crazy 2007 year.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. Vanderbilt just even before the Lenore Sellers injury, they just looked like they were controlling all aspects of that game, and it looked like it was going to possibly get ugly quick. Vanderbilt, I think they have absolutely solidified themselves as a legit team right now. The way they are playing, and they look pretty dangerous right now. And can they cause some ripples in the SEC? I mean, South Carolina was just one of the doors they were knocking on, and they bursted through it. And it'll be interesting to see what they can do with this SEC schedule. I mean, the game on the stat sheet might have looked closer than it was. They were even on the yards. Vandy had 323 total, and South Carolina had 328 total. But Vandy just looked like they were better from top to bottom, from the start of the game to the finish of the game. And obviously, Lenora Sellers getting hurt is going to change everything. When your starting quarterback goes down, it changes every
Huge
aspect
loss
of the game. And it's always going to change it. But you could go down and just say that the turnovers is what killed South Carolina. They had 2 fumbles and 2 interceptions, and that just like I said earlier, interceptions or turnovers in general will absolutely lose you a game, whether it's 1 or 5, like our boy DJ Lagway did. But it's just something you cannot have in a game, especially when it comes to these conference games.
Yeah, turnovers definitely were a storyline here. Hard to overcome those. The scoreboard definitely reflected it. And, I mean, I think you mentioned it. If Vandy has a chance to make noise in the SEC, they have to continue dominating the line of scrimmage. They did that offensive and defensively. Thought both lines looked great. So if they can continue to do that, they're going to continue to make some noise. But next week, they're going to get a chance to host Georgia State. And then South Carolina will be traveling to Mizzou. It's going to be a big game for South Carolina. We'll have to see if Sellers plays, but it's not looking optimistic for him. So South Carolina could drop 2 in a row and really give a chance for Missouri to make some noise as well.
Yeah, that South Carolina game will be a massive one to look out for. But another massive game that happened, and possibly the upset of the week, but I almost want to say it was a little telegraphed, is Georgia Tech winning on a last-second field goal against Clemson, 24-21.
Yeah, I mean, a fire drill walk-off field goal is always electric. You rehearse that in practice every week, and it's never a good feeling when you got to actually pull it out in a game. No timeouts left, 50-yard field goal as time expires to stun Clemson 24-21, like you mentioned. I mean, Haynes King plays like a man who does not care what happens to his body after football, and you cannot help but cheer for it. I mean, his whole body is showing, critical injuries, I think, after every game, and he will lay his life out on the line. He finished the game 20 of 28, 211 yards through the air, and then 25 carries, 103 yards, and a touchdown, laying his life out on the line for Georgia Tech. Like you said, this was a game that I could just feel it in the air. I predicted Georgia Tech to pull this one off. I'll give you credit, coming into this game, Haynes King was questionable. You picked Clemson with the caveat that if King played, then you thought Tech would win. He did play. They did win. But it was a game that Cade Klubnik, on the other hand, he struggled in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for someone who was highly touted as a Heisman favorite early in the preseason, he has not looked like it at all. I mean, 207. Clemson cannot shake off these slow starts in the recent years. They have just shown nothing almost at this point, where it seems like they just can't get anything going. Their offense looks flat. Their defense looks extremely vulnerable. And it's just not looking good down in Clemson right now with Dabo and Cade Klubnik.
Yeah, I saw a great stat saying that before the NIL era, Dabo only had 3 conference losses from 2016 till the start of NIL. And since NIL started, he has now gotten 8 conference losses. So maybe we're seeing a little bit of who was paying a little bit of players here and there before NIL really came into being.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately Georgia Tech deserves its respect. They
Absolutely.
played great. Haynes King, phenomenal player. I cannot give enough credit to Georgia Tech in the way they played. Clemson is never an easy out. They always come and are ready to game. So I think Clemson, they're going to have to get right. They're going to have plenty of opportunities too, but they're 2 losses in with a conference loss. They're going to have to be near perfect the rest of the stretch of this year to make that playoff. We saw them last year. They struggled. They win the ACC and still make it. So anything can happen. but they got to get past these slow starts like you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of last year, I mean, just look at how Miami was. They were 10-2 and didn't end up making the conference championship game, albeit, but they missed out on that at-large bid. I mean, it's just not enough. So for them to have any sort of chance now, I think they got to win the conference. No doubts about it. They have to look, convincing in these next games and do it right and do it well, or else, it's conference or bust for them right now if they have any chance of making that playoff. So they're going to have to really kick it into gear here. And they'll have a chance next week when they host Syracuse, which is, I still think, a pretty decent Syracuse team. And then Georgia Tech will be welcoming Temple, who is coming off of a massive loss against Oklahoma. So two games that could potentially, have some big say in some stuff. But I think they both get it done.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Georgia Tech is going to definitely handle Temple. Clemson, I think they got a tough out with Syracuse. That's a game that you never know how it's going to go. But speaking of games that you never know how it's going to go, WVU, the Mountaineers, winning an all-time thriller in this final year's backyard brawl against Pitt, 31-24 in OT. I was on the ground for that. I can confidently say it is one of the best sporting events I've ever been to in my whole life. I grew up huge WVU fan. Most of my family on my dad's side is from Morgantown, is from West Virginia, so that blue and gold runs in my blood. I love JMU. They're my team, but I cheer for WVU just as hard. And to be there at the backyard brawl, it was my first game, my dad and mom's first game in about 15 years, and man, it just felt like a revival of WVU football. It was an electric atmosphere. It was an emotional game. 62,000 fans packing Mountaineer Field, staying to the very end. Despite WVU going down 10 in the second half, that crowd did not give up. I mean, my legs still hurts from slamming against the bleachers trying to make any kind of noise I could to disrupt Pitt. It was a great game. I have a lot to say, but Tony, I want to give you a chance to talk about it too before I just keep rambling on and on and on.
No, I appreciate it. I mean, I can only imagine what it was like to be in that environment. I mean, from what I got to see of the game, it was electric. That a game, any sort of game that goes into overtime, especially rivalry games, they're always going to be electric. It's always going to be fun, and it's even better when your team comes out with the win. And a game that majority of people never saw coming. Shout out to Pat McAfee, though, who actually was the only person to pick them on game day. He was also the only person to pick Georgia Tech and A&M to win their games as well. So it's insane that they won it, and they won it, and how they won it in the fashion, and it's just fantastic. But I'd love to hear more of what you got to say.
Yeah, man. Well, it feels good to own the backyard brawl till 2029. That's when these teams will next face off. It should be a federal crime that these guys don't play every year. I mean, they should play twice a year. Oh my gosh, it is. These two rivals love to play each other, and these fan bases love to hate each other. You hate the teams, though. You don't hate the fans. I do want to give a shout out to the Pitt fan sitting next to me. Really cool guy. He was funny. We had a great time. But that's the epitome. You hate the schools. You don't hate the fans of the school. But, man, was it just an incredible atmosphere. I don't ever want to hear anyone say SEC football just means more. Go to a game in Morgantown, West Virginia, and tell me that this game doesn't mean as much to those fans as anywhere else in the country, especially the southern regions. I mean, it was a redemption game for Rich Rod. I was skeptical when they rehired him. The way things ended last time, I mean, it left a bad taste in my mouth. It still does, and most people would agree, but he's owned up to his faults. He said it was a huge mistake, biggest one of his professional career, and I truly believe that he will do whatever it takes, even put his life on the line to win at WVU. He wants to bring that hard edge with his players, and he's already turning this culture around. I want to specifically call out that our last coach, Neil Brown, he straight up said that you just can't win at WVU, and if if your head coach is saying that, it's time to move on. And the first thing Rich Rod said when he came back was that you can win here. And he's proven it. You know, when he was here last time, he's proven it. And if you want to get fired up and see someone that really cares about the team they coach, watch his post-game on the field interview, man. It had me emotional, and I've watched it about a dozen times. You can tell how much it means to him, and how much it means to the state of West Virginia. For a long time, WVU has kind of been in the dark, hasn't had the success, but I think college football is better when teams like WVU, and I'll even say it, like Virginia Tech, are better. I think it's good for the game. It's good for it. Mm-hmm. And I think this game just proves that conference realignment is not the best thing for the sport. You know, separating teams like this, they should be playing every year. It was a phenomenal game. I do want to give a couple shout-outs to WVU running back Ty Edwards, stepping in for Jaheim White, carried the ball 25 times for 141 yards and 3 touchdowns, gets his hat trick. Just a phenomenal performance. And then WVU quarterback Nico Marchiol, he gets benched at the start of the second half. WVU proceeds to throw 2 picks after rotating quarterbacks in, goes down 24-14 with about 9 minutes left in the game. You know, feeling like it's a little bit over, but he comes back into the game and just leads this phenomenal comeback. He finished the game with 192 yards and a touchdown. And you could see the emotion on his face, how much this meant to him.
Yeah, I mean, it's always nice seeing, you know, these players, they get benched for bad performances, albeit whatever it is, and you know the backup comes in, either gets hurt or isn't doing as well, and they throw the starter back in there and say get it done, and they get it done. It's one of those. It's almost like a, you know, storybook game there where you could make a whole movie on it, sort of thing. But I do want to touch on some controversial calls. We made a note here saying controversial calls that the refs were ACC refs. That's also very well noted, with certain teams getting the quote unquote hometown refs for their conference. But
Not the case this time in Morgantown with Pitt getting their rest. But yeah, I mean, being on the ground, I mean, I'm admittedly a little bit biased, but a big one, I do want to say Pitt did have more penalties. They had 14 penalties. Their coach wanted to complain in their post-game press conference, but if you look back at the tape, a lot of these penalties were just brain fart plays, holding penalties, false starts, offsides, not penalties where you can really say that the refs made a bad call. You know, those are just disciplined plays. But there's a couple that, you know, did not go WVU's way that I think had a bigger impact on this game. I specifically want to call out the unnecessary roughness at the end of the first half. This is a call that I'm still very confused about after, you know, I did a bunch of research to see if I could better understand what happened, and everything I found was pointing that it doesn't make much sense. If you did not see it, WVU had the ball in Pitt territory, no timeouts left. They ran a QB draw up the middle, didn't get a chance to call to spike the ball, but it was an unnecessary roughness on Pitt as time expired, and it was my understanding during the game, it was my understanding in my research since the game has ended that, and in all my life of watching and playing football, it's my understanding that if you have a defensive penalty to end a half or end a game, that the offense gets an untimed down. And the refs debated for about 5-6 minutes and decided that the half was over, and WVU did not get an untimed down. I believe what should have happened is Pitt should have been addressed a 15-yard penalty, and then WVU would have had a chance to kick what was about a 43, 45-yard field goal at the end of the half, which would have been a huge thing. If someone understands why the half was just called, I'd love to know down in the comments, but it's my understanding that this should have been an untimed down for West Virginia. Not really sure what happened, but it doesn't matter. It all worked out. And then a second penalty I did want to call was Another one on WVU, an unnecessary roughness with 9:30 left on a game and what appeared to be a routine sack. Pitt was inside WVU territory, about the 30-yard line, and everything appeared to be a routine play. WVU sacks Eli Holstein. And then the refs decided to throw an unnecessary roughness flag, a dead ball foul, saying that it was, a dead ball, unnecessary roughness on the WVU player who sacked Holstein. I remember watching it live in the stadium. Again, shout out the Pitt fan next to me. Even he looked like, he was like, what in the world? He agreed that, he was like, come on, that's just football. It was a crazy play that gave Pitt a TD the very next play, and that's what put them up 24-14. But I think that actually really sparked the crowd because people were, to say the least, not very happy.
Yeah, as far as I know, I 100% am with you on the end of half ruling on it, whereas any sort of defensive penalty, whether it's with time on the clock or no time on the clock that happens during the play, it usually becomes, untimed down sort of thing, like especially an unnecessary roughness sort of thing, where 15 yards is a lot, especially coming down at the end of the half when you're in enemy territory where you could potentially walk away with points. So as far as I know, I agree with you on that one, and I think the refs just straight up got it wrong. I would love to see some form of a, referee like report or review on why it was called like that. I know there has been some stuff where a conference will come out and explain situations, but it would be really nice to see on why it was called like that.
Yeah, I agree, but ultimately, Hail Dub V, we get to hold this victory for another 4 years before this rivalry gets to be picked back up, which they just extended from 2029 to 2036. So glad that it was locked in. But you've let me talk about WVU enough. So next week they're going to be on the road kicking off Big 12 play against Kansas. Pitt's going to get a chance to regroup with a bye week before they welcome Louisville to Pittsburgh. Both big games for both of these teams. It'll be an interesting season for both, but I want to give you a chance to talk about your team because Tulane picked up its second Power 4 win against Duke this weekend, 34-27.
Yeah, that was as sweet as a victory as it gets right now. It was a stellar game from start to finish, in my opinion. The score doesn't show it, but I believe Tulane dominated that game from start to finish. They got out to a hefty lead at the start, was stopping Duke on every possession they had, and they just started to look like they were going to walk away with it, and it was just fantastic. Tulane quarterback Jake Retzlaff, the quote-unquote transfer, he's technically a walk-on, had one of the best games of the season so far. He finally looked comfortable in the offense. He threw for 245 yards and had 111 rushing yards with 4 rushing touchdowns on top of it, which is insane. Yeah, it looks like that this offense is catered around him and his ability to move the ball with his legs, and it looks like it is clicking well. Every single time they would run a QB draw, or if it was an option, it seemed like Duke was just lost, and they had no idea he was running the ball, even after he already had 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns. It looked like they had no clue that he was able to do what he could do, and then they started to favor it, and that's when he broke him down with the deep ball. I know he had a 65-yard pass, I believe, to Shaz Preston, which put them in great position there. If he hits him in stride, he definitely scores a touchdown, but underthrew it just the tiniest bit. Corner and safety made a great play to be able to tackle him on the Darian Mensah just looked off almost the entire game. He didn't really start to click until later into the game when it was kind of almost garbage time, and Tulane was playing more of like a prevent sort of thing of don't give up the big chunk plays. They didn't have a lot of turnovers. I know he threw 1 pick, which was very satisfying to see. But he did end up only throwing the one interception, which is better than what they've seen lately with the amount of turnovers they had. But yeah, it was fantastic. One thing I would like to point out is I did like to see, as much as the guy was on my I wasn't very high on him in Mensa coming back, and I don't like the way he left. I did like to see when a Tulane player went down with an injury, he was the first one over there to talk to him and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It looks like I saw that they were saying in the pregame he was talking to all the players that he knew and the coaches as well. And I know after the game, him and Tulane coach John Sumrall had a lengthy talk there at the end, and it looked like it was all fine and dandy, which I gained a lot of respect for that. It's nice to see he knows where it started, where it came from, and but I'm glad we got the last.
Oh yeah, it feels good, I'm sure. So, and I want to say this is the third time Tulane has started off 3-0. Both other times, 98 and 2022, they won 12 games and the conference title. So, if history repeats itself, Tulane will be in the college football playoff this year. And I think it also, you mentioned it, Duke did limit the turnovers, but they found different ways to shoot themselves in the foot, mainly on special teams. They missed a 44-yard field goal after some pre-snap penalties, mishandled a snap on a 50-yard attempt later, and then in the third quarter they had one blocked. I do agree with you. I think Tulane pretty much dominated this game, but those miscues were a huge loss for Duke, and that it really did affect the momentum they could have gained in this game.
Yeah, and I think the special teams probably is what decided this game realistically. The missed 44-yard field goal, that's something on them with the pre-snap penalties. On Duke, I should say, but the mishandled snap and the block kick was massive. I mean, that's 9 points they walk away without. So, and they only ended up winning the game by 7. So that could have very drastically swung the game. I think the special teams for Tulane really showed up in creating that pressure and causing them to do whatever and just kind of really setting the tone there. But I loved it. It was great, but I think next week is probably an even bigger game because they will be traveling to Ole Miss, which is a massive, massive game. We'll get more into it in our preview episode, but they travel on the road to an SEC team, a ranked SEC team, I should say, and it could very much decide how the season goes. Not according to you, but
no, but I think Tulane is a ranked team, so I do think that this is a huge game for Tulane. Despite me not having Ole Miss ranked, that doesn't mean they're a bad team. They're a very good, competitive, dangerous team. So Tulane can beat Ole Miss and start 4-0 before entering American Conference play. They're going to, after USF's loss, they're going to be the front runner, and they don't have to play USF till that conference championship game if they both make it. But on the other hand, Duke falls again. They're going to open ACC at home against NC State, a very dangerous team. Duke needs to figure something out, or they're quickly going to be in the hole and be 1-3 through 4 weeks.
Yeah, they gotta really start clicking here. These early season mishaps is what really sets teams back when it comes to that end of season, playoff prediction sort of stuff. So we're gonna move right into some top player performances of the week. To start off, what we just said, the Tulane quarterback Jake Retzloff and his phenomenal game, finally looking comfortable in that offense, and it looks like it's only going up from him, and I would say probably the best game of his career.
Yeah, he looked phenomenal. I mean, if they can keep having that offense centered around them, they're going to be dangerous, and Ole Miss will be in trouble next week. Another player we talked about, Carson Beck, had a phenomenal game, 23-28, 340 yards, 3 touchdowns. If he can keep this up, Miami's going to be the team to beat, in my opinion. While on the other hand, I think A&M quarterback Marcel Reed, despite a bad completion percentage, he made the plays when it mattered. 360 yards, 2 touchdowns, 207 of those going to Mario Craver, and another one of those touchdowns. Both of those players balled out when it mattered the most. So shout out them. Get that huge win over Notre Dame in South Bend.
Yeah, I mean, the Mario Craver numbers are video game numbers, realistically. It's just
Oh,
absolutely
insane.
insane to see. And then finally, the last one to point out is Georgia quarterback Gunnar Stockton having a pretty good game on the road against an SEC opponent, throwing up the 304 yards and 2 touchdowns, and then adding in that rushing touchdown.
Yeah, I think he played great. Him and Aguilar. I mean, Aguilar deserves a shout out here too. He played
Yeah.
phenomenal. But moving on to some people who might not deserve a positive shout out, we had our first coaching firings of the year. This is really big news. Virginia Tech fires Brent Pry after a 16-24 record in his career there. Virginia Tech really has been a shell of its former self for a long time. As two boys from Virginia, it's I'm not a Tech fan. I'm a Tech hater, but it's sad to see. I mentioned it earlier. I think college football is better when teams and programs in like Tech are thriving. You know, Lane Stadium had its second lowest crowd turnout in a long time for this game against ODU, and Brett Pry's career started with a loss to ODU and ends with a loss to ODU.
Yeah.
And I also want to say that despite this, you know, it's still going to be an uphill battle for Virginia Tech. I think this year they're going to have to finish strong, but it's always hard to keep the recruits and transfers coming in when there's no head of the program.
Yeah, and then the other firing that we had mentioned, UCLA coach Deshaun Foster, his second season at the helm, gets fired almost. I mean, with not a lot of time there. 5-10 record. They got that transfer that they wanted in Nico, and it just has not looked good. That team looks like they
No.
are a JV team. They
Yeah.
have lost to two Mountain West conference teams, albeit, I'm not saying the Mountain West is bad, but
No
those are
disrespect.
games, yeah, no disrespect, but those are games that you schedule thinking you have a high chance of winning, and they have just looked abysmal. Do want to note that with these firings, players are eligible to transfer 30 days after the firing because the coach was fired in season. And since it occurred before 4 games have been played, players can redshirt if they are eligible. Virginia Tech has 37 players eligible for a red shirt, while UCLA has 33 players eligible for a red shirt. So that's something we'll keep an eye on here in these coming weeks, especially in today's day and age with the portal and how important it is to see if
Yeah.
these players can hit it, can get that move that they need, and then possibly just redshirt to come back and be better the next year.
Yeah, you know, it is. It wouldn't be surprising if we see a lot of mass exodus from these two programs. They started off the year 0-3. If I was a player, I would like to preserve some eligibility if I can. So definitely something close to monitor. Just like the situation in Florida with Billy Napier or in Arkansas with Sam Pittman, both of these coaches have struggled, been around 500 at these programs. So I think these two are definitely going to be on the hot seat if this season does not pan out in some sort of meaningful results.
Yeah, those are definitely probably the two next on the hot seat, and their seat is probably the hottest. I would say Billy Napier's is the hottest, but with some of the statements that the Florida AD, I guess, puts out saying that he is the coach, sort of thing, almost makes me think that they're going to give him the season at minimum, and if they do it, it probably won't be till the end of the season. But if they go down to Miami, get embarrassed, and they come out of this rough stretch of games that they have without getting a win, it's going to be sooner rather than later for Billy.
Yeah, I agree with you. Not if they can get a huge win against Miami this coming week, it will definitely do miles to save his job.
Yeah.
But jumping into this next topic we wanted to briefly talk on is the influx of targeting penalties this week. I think we saw a lot called this week. It's a difficult rule to call as a ref. I think it's a rule that I think I overall dislike. I do appreciate the player safety, but I think it is such a challenging thing for defensive players to adjust when football is such a fast-paced game where just because you lower your helmet doesn't mean that you're trying to target. You might be going in for a tackle, and then the offensive player drops their level and next thing you know, you're hitting them helmet to helmet when before you're about to hit them in the torso. It is a really challenging thing to think about when you're playing. I think what I dislike about this rule the most is if it's a second half penalty, the player has to sit out for a half the next game. I really dislike that part of the rule. I wish that there was a more fine line and gray area with it where it's not so black and white with if your helmet's lower, then it's an instant penalty. I think it should be a case-by-case scenario.
Yeah, it's one of those things I think that's going to be controversial from till the end of time. It's so opinionated and it's really hard. And with the way the rule is written, it makes it even harder to try and judge some of these. I agree with you in the sense of, a defensive player, it's much, much harder to make that sort of tackle when you're going down and then the offensive player also decides to go down with you and it makes you look bad. So I don't know if there's going to be, a quick fix or just something that makes it better. It's just going to have to be how they decide to do it. The only thing I think I could somewhat agree with is when they call it and then they get the chance to review it and then,
I do like that it's reviewable.
Yes, where it's like, okay, it's not. So we're good, 15 yards for unnecessary roughness or whatnot, or what it could be, and then that's it. No ejections, no nothing. That's the only, I guess you could say, light spot about it is that it is reviewable. But then some of the reviews is what's kind of killing it right now in the sense of is it, when you're looking, when you're looking at it in super slow-mo, it's always going to look worse. It always is, always will be. It's one of those things where it's like you got to watch it at full speed and see what's going on. You got to give defenders a little cushion of time to where, they're allowed to try and make a play, and then there's sometimes where it's they don't get that time to make a play and they've already made their decision, and that decision ends up ruining the game for them and their team.
Yeah, it's a challenging one to call. I'm glad I don't have to be a referee throwing that flag. I appreciate the player's safety. It's just football is such a fast game that it can be challenging to call that one. So, I guess we'll see how it's changed. I don't expect the rule to change at all, but wanted to just touch on this considering how many we saw this week, and thought it would be nice to give our opinions on.
Yeah,
speaking of giving our opinions, what everyone's been waiting for, our rankings.
Yep, you see we're both excited for it. It's fun to talk about. We love our rankings. So we'll jump right into ours between Hunters and I, and we'll quickly go over the criteria one more time. Head-to-head is a key factor for us. Those results do matter. Results over anything. We do not consider hypotheticals. We don't care about neutral fields, the what-ifs. Teams will not be punished for losing their conference title game, and then the overall team vibe of teams. So you can go ahead and lead off, and what you got.
Yeah, I mean, as you can see, new number one for me, Miami. They beat who I had at number 5 handedly in USF. So they're the new number one. I think they've earned it. They have a great resume. They've looked really good. And then on the other hand, I have LSU sliding back a little bit after a lackluster offensive performance. I had them up at number 3. I've slid them back down. And then, I've had Texas, despite the opening week loss, sitting around 11 and 12. But after this last performance, I had to slide them back down to 22. I just couldn't keep them ranked as high as I did. And this is where you see, the results matter and overall team vibe. We're not going to be afraid to have teams slide despite a win if we don't think they're performing up to that ranking. If there's other teams more deserving, I'm going to have to side with the more deserving team, which, like Georgia, to me, was a more deserving team. It was a team I had slide last week just because other teams had some really great performances. I think they looked great this week. I know I don't have Tennessee ranked, but I think it's an impressive win. So they jump up to that 4 spot for me, while I have USF dropping from 5 to 15. And then Vandy jumping all the way up to number 11 for me. I think they deserve it. They've looked great. I cannot say enough about them, and Georgia Tech also deserves some respect. I had A&M, NC State, and USC join my rankings. Shout out A&M. I know I've been having some people on me for not having them ranked, so they
Yeah.
finally get the respect. And then Notre Dame and Clemson, unsurprisingly, fall out. I cannot rank an 0-2 team despite Notre Dame, I think, being a really good team. I can't rank them at 0-2, and Clemson being
Yeah.
1-2, it's the same thing. I can't rank a team when there's teams that are still undefeated out there.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I as well, had Notre Dame drop out. I just cannot have a winless team where we are priding ourselves on results. I don't care if it was against two really tough opponents, my new number one in Miami from week one, and then Texas A&M in a very close one. I just can't have a winless team in my top 25 when there are much deserving 2 and 3-0 teams out there. So like you, I had Miami jump up to 1. I had USF drop as far as they did purely because of the blowout fashion. Losing by 37 is not a good sign. I know it is against my best team and your best team in the country, but losing in that fashion is never nice. Georgia moves up for a great win against a good Tennessee team. I had Tennessee drop some to 20, but they still are going to stay ranked because, to me, quality lesson. South Carolina is going to drop pretty drastically for me, but I'm giving them the tiniest bit of leeway purely because of that Lenora Stella injury. If it was with him the entire game and the outcome was still the same, they would have probably dropped, in my opinion. But I'm going to leave them in at 25 to give them that little bit of leeway purely because it's really hard when a starting quarterback drops out. And then with that game, I had Vandy jump all the way up into my rankings at 18. I had Georgia Tech jump in at 16, Mississippi State jumping in at 23, and then I had USC jump in at 23, or I'm sorry, yeah, or my bad, 24, sorry, I have it mislabeled. Both Vandy obviously deserving of it. They had a great game against South Carolina, albeit without their starting quarterback, but they still showed they deserved it. And then one quick note I want to make about my rankings is I kind of forgot about BYU. I had them ranked last week. And when I filled out my rankings, I felt confident, but I kept looking at it thinking, man, I'm really forgetting something. And I went back and forth between my week 2 rankings to this one, and I just couldn't point it out. And so I filled it with what I thought, and then turns out I totally forgot a team. So I will fix it for my next rankings next week. I just didn't have time or the effort really to fix it because after collecting all of our group rankings and then combining those to make our official poll, I just didn't want to mess it up, throw off the rankings and whatnot. So I will 100% go back into it and look back into it next week, and barring any terrible BYU loss or anything like that, they will more than likely be ranked again. In my poll, at least.
I think it's safe to say you probably would have had them in there over South Carolina, and South Carolina would have been edged out there.
Probably.
But I think it goes to show that we harped on the AP voters, and we probably will continue to all year. But it's easy to make mistakes. It happens, and
yes,
I think it's a good lesson. You just got to admit when a mistake was made instead of make up an excuse for it.
Yeah, that's why we love to quote our quality lessons, exactly. And this is very much a quality lesson for me, and for hopefully for BYU to show out and shut me up. So we're gonna move on to the AP and our collective group Dynasty Dummy rankings. We had some movement here, obviously, with how the games panned out. So I'll let you go ahead and lead off with how the AP looks.
Yeah, I think first off, there hasn't been much change in that top 25, top 5. And I do think it's kind of crazy that South Florida dropped all the way out of the rankings to losing to number 4 Miami. I think even at 2-1 and the blowout loss, they deserve to be in there, especially over a team like Notre Dame. I don't quite get that. It's typical AP voter stuff. I mean, there's some glaring bad ballots, not to call out specific names, but one voter still had South Carolina at 10 and Vanderbilt unranked, while another one had South Carolina at 15 and Vandy unranked. What are we doing here? I just don't get that. And then Notre Dame became... Oh, sorry, you go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with you there that it's just absolutely terrible that we're still, even with the recent light of bad AP ballots, you would think some of these AP voters would be like, oh, we should probably hunker down and actually do what we're supposed to do, but we still have some really bad ones, and I think it's good on the public to kind of point this out and show that it does matter, and these voters need to realize that their stuff does in fact matter, so hopefully they can make the changes.
Yeah, I agree. Notre Dame still being ranked at 0-2. It's the first time in 37 years that an 0-2 team is still ranked in the top 25 of the AP vote. I've mentioned it a couple times. I do think they're a great team, but 0-2, the results aren't there. You got to win games to be ranked, and they have yet to win a game. They are defeated so far through the season. And another little note, as you can see, Alabama and Texas still ranked much higher in the AP poll, actually ranked compared to not being ranked in our poll. Two teams that I think us as a collective group just need to see more out of. I know I had Texas sliding this week despite the win, so I do think these teams will be making an appearance in the Dynasty Dumbies poll. But Clemson falls out, but Tennessee, it's the first time in the last 2 years a team lost and did not move at all in the AP voting ballots. So some interesting stuff going on in the AP. A&M jumping up into the top 10. Ole Miss being just outside of it, and Indiana sitting at 19. Definitely some things to watch about, but definitely some discrepancies compared to our poll, which I know you're excited to jump into here.
Yeah, our poll, our top 5, I believe, between all of us was relatively the same, barring some, minor movements. But as you can see, like you had mentioned, Alabama and Texas gone. I finally outed our Alabama voter and got him to change his mind. And we all kind of talked about it, and we figured out that he was using hypotheticals, which we do not allow. I'm talking to you, Edwin. So we will see how it goes for the rest of our time here. But South Carolina dropping out, Notre Dame dropping out, Texas dropping out, Clemson dropping out of ours, and then those who entered our rankings is Georgia Tech, Vanderbilt, UNLV, and Mizzou. These are, typical movements in our side. We love to look at weekly results and how they pan out. And like we said, our criteria is pretty hammered down on. So the movement around here shouldn't be relatively too crazy. I know we did convince you to move USF a little farther down, so that you had them at I believe 11, I want to say, and we convinced you to move them down a little bit purely because of the fashion that they had lost in. So they had dropped down to 20 for us, making Tulane our highest G5 team so far. But, all things considered, I think ours rankings they're pretty solid. We got some ranked matchups on our side coming up this week. Specifically, I'm going to point out Tulane versus Ole Miss, obviously. 2 ranked matchup. It could decide Tulane's season. It could just boost Ole Miss's season. So depending on the outcome of that game could drastically change how some of them are ranked. And I know specifically our friend Will has said to me privately that Tulane is just on the cusp of getting voted in for him. If they win against Ole Miss, they will 100% be ranked. So it'll be interesting to see how some of these games pan out this upcoming week.
Sorry about that, guys. A little bit of technical difficulties, but we're back. Tony, I think you bring up some great points. There's going to be some really great ranked matchups according to the Dynasty Dummies poll and according to the AP poll. But just wanted to touch right here at the end on some teams that did receive some votes in the Dynasty Dummies polls this week. Texas, even though they dropped out, they still received 11 votes alongside USC and Auburn. Houston came in with 7 total votes, Baylor 6, TCU 5, South Carolina still getting 4, NC State with 2, and Arizona State at 1. So definitely a lot of teams to watch out for. I also want to give a little shout out Navy. We talked about them earlier. Still a really good team with a lot of opportunities in front of them. But it's going to be a great week 3 of it was a great week 3 of college football. Week 4's looking to be just as great. So let us know what you guys are looking for in these upcoming matchups. We're going to be previewing them later this week. Let us know what games you want to see, what games interest you the most, and what you think's in store. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Dynasty Dummies, or follow our personal accounts at Hunter_Shaw5 or at CronyTony20.
Yep. Thank you all for watching this video. We'll see you in the preview show.
See y'all.